I remember in the beginning, one of my nurses was focused on removal of the eye, but the doctor told me that the treatment that I have will not be any more significantly riskier than if I removed my eye at the time. So I had to push back and say, no, I want this treatment before we go to removal of the eye.
Thank you guys for joining us today on the I Believe podcast. I am joined today by guest Megan McClay, who is an ocular melanoma patient who, if you have followed social media or BBC at all, you saw her article dropped. I think it was just this last month. And it was an incredibly written article just detailing her journey with facing a stage 4 diagnosis with uveal melanoma. And she told her story beautifully, and I really just wanted to give her the opportunity to capture her story on the podcast as well. So Megan, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So can you just tell us briefly where are you from, and let's maybe start at the beginning of your diagnosis journey.
Yeah, of course. So I'm from England, if you can't tell by the accent already. And I was originally diagnosed with stage 1 in February 2020. So I was 26 years old. The symptoms started initially with a small flashing light in the corner of my left eye. Never had a migraine before, so I assumed maybe that's what this is, and I ignored it for about a week, but even when my eyes were closed, I could still see it. I ended up calling an optometrist, and as soon as I mentioned flashing light, they said go to A&E. And then that started the journey of diagnosis, which was originally they couldn't tell whether it was cancer or benign because it had characteristics of both. So they decided to treat it initially with a few rounds of photodynamic therapy. It would help me preserve my vision, and if it did respond to that, we knew immediately it was ocular melanoma, which it did. It responded to that very well, and it was confirmed. So continued that for a few months until it stopped working, and then went on to stereotactic radiotherapy, which was very successful, shrunk the tumor significantly, and surprisingly is still tiny now. I mean, when I look at scans, it's like scar tissue. You can barely even see it. And that continued on and on until around February 2022, when it was confirmed that I had stage 4 and it had then spread to the liver. And that's where we are now.
I know the initial diagnosis, and just when you get that kind of confirmed that there's recurrence of some kind, whether it's recurrence in the eye or recurrence for it spreading elsewhere, like the liver. Can you just kind of maybe draw some parallels? Did you notice anything that felt similar? And was there aspects of maybe having a stage 4 diagnosis that felt worse? And how did you navigate those just as an individual?
It felt kind of similar to me as to when I first was diagnosed with stage 1 and then understood what the diagnosis was. Because there was a while when I was diagnosed with stage 1 that I didn't really understand the threat of it, because it's so small. I'd never even heard of eye cancer. And I believed that it was something we could just treat and move on with at the time. And when I started understanding and doing my own research, it was like it was something I really struggled to comprehend. It was a complete blow at that time. And I was just starting to come to terms with that, living in uncertainty, when it was confirmed it was stage 4, which was then very similar, right back into that mindset of not knowing what is going to happen from here on. So yeah, it was kind of similar in a way.
So as you've navigated this uncertainty, especially around a stage 4 diagnosis, what have been some of the things that you've struggled with in the realm of uncertainty?
It's something I continue to struggle with now. I try to live in the present more and more. I try not to think about the past or the future too much if I can help it. But it's the uncertainty of, whether treatments are going to work. We look at the statistics, but we see people defying them all the time, and then on the contrary, we see people who are passing way before the stats tell us. So I just don't know what is next for me. I mean, my doctor initially gave me less than 2 years. I'm at about a year and a half now. So I'm hoping to defy those odds, but it's just uncertainty in every aspect. I have no idea what awaits me in terms of life expectancy or anything.
So, do you mind telling our audience, how old were you when you were first diagnosed?
I was 26 when I was first diagnosed.
And that was in
2020.
2020. Okay, so actually we were diagnosed the same year. That's crazy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just was a couple years older than you, but not by much.
Oh,
Not
wow, I
by
didn't
much.
realize that.
So yeah, I understand. I understand a lot of kind of the feelings, because I felt a lot of those myself. So as you've gone through, especially your stage 4 diagnosis, and you've been navigating this past year and a half of having various different treatments, do you want to go ahead and maybe just share briefly what are some of the treatments and things that you've had to endure or that you have chosen to follow through with?
Yeah, of course. So I had initially, it was 3 rounds of photodynamic therapy, which I agreed to have because it is a bit specialized. There's not many hospitals in the UK that do it. And it was going to be able to preserve my vision. And my tumor is right near the optic nerve, so I thought, if I can preserve my vision, let's give it a shot. So we tried that, and that worked for a while. As soon as it stopped, we went on to stereotactic radiotherapy, which was a lot more intense of a treatment. It was just a one-time treatment. And although it worked, I'm now completely blind in my left eye. So there's good and bad
Kind of
bits
a give
of
and
it.
take there.
Yeah, exactly. And then a few Avastin injections. As soon as my vision started to deteriorate, we tried to preserve as much of it as we could, but it was unsuccessful. Again, worth a try.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I know that's kind of the mindset I had to approach a lot of everything to do with this diagnosis with, is just that, okay, it's worth a try, because, I'm this old and I may as well just try it. Like, what's it going to hurt? So as you proceeded with liver-directed treatments, I'm going to assume that you've had some kinds of liver-directed treatments. What's been available to you in the UK, and maybe just share some of the barriers you've faced?
Yeah, of course. So at the moment I'm on tebentafusp. I think you know it as Kimtrack over there. So I have that every week. And that has been keeping me stable now for a good few months. But initially, when I started it, my tumours were still increasing in size and mass, gradually, but they were. And now in the liver I have about 50 plus tumours, all scattered around my liver. So it started to become very scary, because every MRI was showing a bigger increase and a bigger increase. So my family and I started looking at what other options were available to us, and they're very limited. There aren't many, unless you're willing to risk a trial, which works very well for some people but doesn't for others. And we came across chemosaturation, DELCAF, which unfortunately is not funded by the NHS. It's been approved by NICE but not funded by the NHS. So we started fundraising for that, and that was incredibly daunting, because here, it's a round of DELCAF is around £40,000. You could need up to 6. It depends on how you respond to the first few. So I mean, £40,000 just to start with the first treatment is just crazy. But luckily, we were successful in that, mainly because a radio station picked up my fundraising, LBC, and the audience there just massively came together and helped me so much. But this is something I really really upsets me, is because it's just that luck that got me this fundraising, and I see people now who are still fundraising for more time and more life, which is incredibly frustrating to see, because we see very, very good outcomes of this treatment and people are just being denied it for finance, which is very upsetting. But that's where I am at the moment, where I started fundraising for DELCAF, and then as I was approaching my fundraising ending, I started to get stable results from my tebentafusp, and for the last 3 MRIs I've had stability, well, technically stability. They've increased a tiny bit, but not enough for it to warrant any issue. So at the moment, I'm just staying on this for as long as it works, and as soon as it stops working, I'll be jumping straight over to Delcath and then hoping for the best there.
Well, that's absolutely incredible that you were able to have such, community support from that radio station. I think I saw when your fundraiser first went live and just some of the results of it getting picked up by the news station. But like you said, not every patient has that chance. Not every patient, especially in ocular melanoma, like we're such a rare cancer. And I mean, most of the time, if there's any level of personal fundraising happening to try to afford treatment, it isn't picked up by a news station. It's shared, between communities across social media. And like you said, the cost is daunting. And so for there to be a lack of approval for that, in any area of the world, for treatment to be accessible to a patient and not financially inaccessible, is so difficult. And I appreciate the candidness that you talk about that with, or talk about that. Because it's an ongoing problem, whether it's that there's little access to a spot in a trial if you choose to go down the route of doing a trial, or that the treatments you do have access to, you're being denied because some level of health insurance or the government isn't quite, up to speed. And that can feel really, really incredibly frustrating to just be a patient where like the odds are already stacked against you enough, right? Like,
yeah,
not like you need anything else.
Yeah, this is exactly it. And it's so unfair because, I've seen people in the past having to sell their homes. I'm now seeing another couple having to consider selling their homes. And it's just ridiculous that people are having to do this when the treatment is there. It's there. NICE have approved it. There's been good results from it. It's just technicalities and lack of progression that's preventing these amazing people having life-prolonging treatment. It's incredibly frustrating, but yeah.
Well, I think we talked about this before, like, these uncomfortable topics, these uncomfortable areas of having this diagnosis, especially in other areas of the world, but it crosses over into the United States. Like this is an issue that needs to be addressed. We need to shed light on this. And so, if there are other patients struggling with this, I hope you guys will, voice that, because I think the more voices we hear from across the world, across various different institutions, the better chance we have of being heard. So thank you for taking the time today, Megan, to not only talk about your story, but also just to bring some light to some of the issues that are faced by you and other patients, especially where you live.
Oh, no problem. It's very important to me, so I'm always happy to voice it when I get the chance.
So let's just chat a little bit about your support system. From what I can glean, you have a pretty solid support system, but who or what have been some of your greatest supports through your diagnosis?
Yeah, absolutely. So my main support has been my partner, who's been with me through every step of this and has just been incredible throughout all of it, as has my mum. My mum has been my absolute rock throughout all of this as well. And friends, my aunties Emma and Marie. I've got some really, really good, solid support behind me, and I don't know how I would have been able to do it if I didn't. So I think it's very important to, if you have those people around you that kind of get it as much as they can, because they're not in your shoes, they won't, you have to have realistic expectations, but if they're willing to stand by you, hold them close, because not everybody will be. I'm sure, we've all seen that you do lose friends and people distance themselves when you become really poorly. So I'm very lucky. I've got a very strong support system.
I think that's such a powerful thing to have that support system. And like you said, if you have that support as a patient, it can make all the difference in the world in just navigating this and coping with the day-to-day. And if you don't, that doesn't mean that there's no way to build that support. We've talked about this in the Eye on Mental Health seminar, that it's really very possible to build new friendships, to build lasting relationships with new people, be it people who are diagnosed or just fellow cancer survivors. Kind of the unexpected people who come into your life and stick around. Keep those people close. Like, that's such an important thing.
Absolutely.
What do you feel like have been some of the? I know it's kind of one of those tricky things to say, but like, what are some of the gifts that have come, like, the good things, the things that, you know, maybe you wish they could have come a different way, but like that they have made a big difference in how you navigate life now, just kind of as a result of where you are in your diagnosis.
Well, like you were just saying, you can meet new people that can be incredible. If you don't already have that support system there, you can find it. And that is, again, I've been able to expand on my support system massively. Meeting other people with ocular melanoma has been incredible. I've met like the most amazing people. And we have a group at my hospital called Secondary Sisters, which is all women that have stage 4 cancer. And again, an amazing group of women that I wouldn't have met if I wasn't in this situation. But I have seen the biggest kindness of strangers on my cancer journey that I never would have been able to experience otherwise. I mean, with fundraising, there was people from all over the world, different financial situations, religions, different beliefs, all coming together to support me. And I mean, that's incredible to witness. That's something that kind of fuels me all the time when you're having those low days. And I never even seen anything remotely like that before, been able to be on the receiving end of it. So that is just, yeah, amazing. And I'm very lucky to have been able to experience that. So definitely stands out to me.
Yeah. So what are a few of the ways you've had to learn to advocate for yourself during this diagnosis? Just to, you know, have a voice in what's happening to you. Obviously, I mean, we're here. You're advocating for yourself in some way here on social media, just in being part of our podcast. But what are some of the other ways that you've been able to learn just to speak up for what you need, what you want, be it with people or with your doctors?
I struggled with this quite a bit in the beginning. I'm quite a shy person and not great with confrontation, but I learned quite quickly that this was something I was going to have to do my own research on. You know, it's a rare cancer. You sometimes have to tell your doctor what you've seen or direct them to trials or whatnot. And it's just learning as you go along, that you have to explain what you're concerned about. I mean, I remember in the beginning, one of my nurses was focused on removal of the eye, but the doctor told me that the treatment that I have will not be any more significantly riskier than if I removed my eye at the time. So I had to push back and say, no, I want this treatment before we go to removal of the eye. Whereas previously I would have probably just gone, okay, if that's what you think is best. And the only reason I understood that is because my doctor said it. I had to look into it. I spoke to other people with ocular melanoma. But you really, really do have to be your own advocate, which is very difficult. But every doctor's appointment, you have to make sure your head is screwed on with this illness, I feel, unfortunately. It's one of the burdens of a rare one.
Yeah, that's so true. It's quite the visual there, that your head is screwed on properly. But I mean, going into these appointments prepared can be it can be life-changing in some ways, because you have the opportunity to put things in front of your doctor that maybe they didn't consider before. And I appreciate hearing from patients who have that dialogue, or who are willing to get out of their comfort zone and have that dialogue with their doctor, because I think it challenges our doctors to think outside the box. And if thinking inside the box did anything for anyone, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So, thinking outside the box can make such a big difference. And it also, especially I think as maybe just as younger patients, I think it definitely helps me to have that dialogue and to feel like I'm part of the decision-making process. Even if it's just to gather information and really just talk back and forth about certain things, that can make such a big difference in just how I feel going into whatever I decide to do, right?
Definitely. I feel like sometimes as a young woman as well, you have to fight to be taken seriously a little bit. I remember when I first was having photodynamic therapy, and the consultant that performed it was telling me that you should have very minimal side effects. And the next day, it looked like I had been punched in the eye. My eye was so swollen and so sore for a good couple of days, very, very sore. And the next time I went to see him, I explained, it was a very painful. I had to go to emergency and get codeine. My eye was very sore. And he seemed like he didn't believe me. He's like, well, it shouldn't be. Patients haven't reported that before. So the next time I came into him, I came with a photo to say, this is something that some people may experience. This is something I've experienced. So maybe this is something you should warn people of. Make sure they have correct pain medicine in prior to this, because it happens. It does happen, because this, there's not, these treatments are all relatively new. The research is relatively new, and people are learning as they go along, and that's fine, but believe a patient when they tell you it was painful. You shouldn't have to bring in a photo, but you have to advocate.
Yeah, no, that's such a powerful thing, and it kind of brings up one of the points too, that not only in being a young woman, but really just being a patient facing a doctor in general, there can be a level of what some patients and nurses refer to as white coat syndrome, where you almost kind of not belittle yourself. It's that you just kind of, you tone down what you think as the patient, because your doctor is the doctor, and they know best because they're your doctor, and it can be kind of one of the downfalls almost. It's not a terrible thing for a doctor to be confident. Like, we want doctors who are confident in what they do and in how they treat patients, but when that confidence comes at the cost of the patient maybe kind of talking down to themselves and telling themselves, oh, well, what I'm experiencing must just not be the right thing. Like, it must be unrelated because my doctor told me I shouldn't be having these side effects. Like, it's just one of those things, like you said, that a patient should be believed. Whether or not the doctor thinks those are the side effects they should be having is irrelevant. If a patient is saying they're experiencing something, it is real. And to treat it as definitely. Such. So I admire that you approached that in such a way, and that you brought in some proof too, to be like, look, this happened.
Definitely. Yeah. It's like, look, I've got the evidence here.
Yeah, exactly. So if you were to talk to someone who, and I want to cover two parts of this. I would say, what would you tell someone who's brand new to this diagnosis? They've never come across ocular melanoma before. And then kind of on not the flip side, but just in addition to that, is there anything you would add for someone who is now experiencing a new metastatic diagnosis?
The main thing for people who are newly diagnosed is to remember that although you will meet people that have the same cancer, how you respond to it is incredibly unique. So I think try not to compare your journey or your treatment to other people. Make sure you do your research, make sure you get an oncologist that you trust, and take it from there, because I think I made the mistake in the beginning of I would compare myself to others, or I would get so much anxiety when I was seeing people pass at a particular time who may be on the same treatment as me, and that can control you. So try to remember that your journey is going to be a unique one. You will respond to treatments in your own way, and don't compare too much, but do look for that support system and do educate yourself. When it comes to a diagnosis of recognizing that it's now become stage 4, I think that is just something you're never going to be prepared for, but it is something that will become your new normal. Even though it doesn't seem like that's going to be possible, it will, and you will be able to enjoy your life, the mundane things in life. That will be something that you can put to the back of your mind. Every now and then it will come up and it will become unbearable, but for the most part it will be in the back of your mind. It just feels really loud at the beginning, but it'll quieten down.
That's such a good way to explain just how much noise this diagnosis can make at the beginning in your brain, and that, like you said, it quiets. So as you've navigated this stage 4 diagnosis, I know your article on BBC, I think it was titled like something around living with a terminal cancer diagnosis. So one of the things that we briefly talked about before we went live was just this idea of just shedding light and some normalcy on the topic of, facing the fact that your mortality could very well come to an end based on this, because of this diagnosis. So what are some of the things that have helped you in facing that fear, really? Because I think a lot of us fear even talking about our mortality.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, I was the same. It's only natural to not want to talk about that. It's not a comfortable topic. But then when I started looking into it more, looked into palliative, looked into hospice care, it actually made me feel better to understand what was going to be happening at the time where I do eventually pass. Because when you don't know, your mind can build all sorts of conclusions. But now I know, I've got a great hospice. Hopefully, I will be able to have a place there. But again, this is another thing that needs more funding. And that's exactly what the project in the article is trying to do, is get more funding so we can have the option of hospice if we want it. Amongst many other things it's trying to do, but it's something for me where if I get it organized and I get it planned, I don't have to worry about it so much anymore. It's an uncontrollable thing, but you can have little bits of control in it. You can control to the best of your ability where it's going to be, and try and calm yourself a little bit by understanding what is going to happen. And in a weird way, your family can be relieved by that too, because we all think they don't want to talk about it, and a lot of people don't, but they do have some kind of comfort knowing that isn't something they'll have to organize or deal with alone as well. So there's many benefits to it.
That's such a powerful thing to talk about too, and I loved what you said about how, like, when you started exploring those options more, right, with hospice, with palliative care, that it stopped feeling quite as daunting and as scary because you were putting some tangibility to what you were facing. It was no longer this unknown thing that your brain was building stories around. It was something that you had some tangible explanations, you had maybe some representations. I'm going to assume you probably got to see some facilities and just see the kind of support that you could have and talk to people who really could break down kind of the process. When you were talking and have talked about hospice and palliative care with various different professionals and your family, have you found that the discomfort of this topic has gotten easier with time?
Yes, I think this is something that definitely does have time attached to it, but that is unfortunate because, as we all know, we don't always have time. I'm very lucky that I'm still here, and by the time my family have started coming to terms and talking about it and looking into it, I'm still healthy enough to be receptive to that. But one of the biggest things is really having realistic expectations of people and not thinking about what is only best for you, but what is best for the people around you. Some people might prefer that you have it planned, and when the time comes, they're introduced to the plan then. They don't always need to be involved in the planning. So you just have to adapt with family, friends, loved ones. But it's definitely not something you walk in initially, all guns blazing, looking to plan your death. It takes a while to get comfortable with that. So of course, everyone around you can take some time too.
Yeah, and like you said, it's such a process, and I think that it was Suzanne. I mentioned Suzanne O'Brien, the palliative care and hospice care nurse who did an interview with us a couple of months ago, and she just talked about it's such an empowering thing for the patient, but it also ends up being such an empowering thing for the family to have. Just to have a better grasp on the process, and also to have a better grasp on the resources available to them to support, both you and them, like your family, your partner, whoever's involved in your care. Like it's such an empowering thing to have that knowledge, as opposed to, and to be able to build the support for it to like be available to you when you need it. Because I'm going to assume that the kind of palliative care that you might pursue now is going to look very different than what it might look like a year from now or 2 years from now, or whenever something shifts and changes in your current medical status. And having those things in place so that they're already prepared, like you said, it can offer that layer of reassurance both to you and your brain, but also for your family, so that they don't have to grasp at straws to try to figure out, well, what are we supposed to do next? It's already largely been dictated on some level. And like you said, like there's going to be nuances and there's going to be pieces that you can't really decide ahead of time. But as much as is possible, those little bits of control, I like how you described that, just those little bits of control that you can take hold of and use that.
Yeah, definitely. And you can also find ways when you explore this and you look into what is available to you, you can find ways to make your life easier to live. Not just planning the death aspect, but make life easier. Like my local hospice are now going to start helping me with physio because I've started getting a lot weaker. They can help with talking therapies and all sorts of things. It's not just a place you go at the end. They can help you live the best version of yourself now too. So when you explore it, lots of doors open for you.
I think that's such an important thing. So thank you. Thank you for shedding light on this topic and sharing the journey of what it's looked like for you to open those doors and just open those conversations so that it was no longer this unknown thing. It became much more known. So let's, as we're coming to a close, I just wanted to ask you, is there maybe a defining belief that you've adopted in this whole journey the last few years? And it's kind of crazy, I'm sure, to think that it's only been, less than 4 years probably since your initial diagnosis. But in these last 4 years, any kind of defining belief, a mantra, defining belief, really just any kind of mindset that has helped you the most?
No, not more than trying to focus on what is currently happening. And I feel like this is something that I never used to do prior to diagnosis. I was always thinking either my mind was left in the past, or I was focused on what I was going to do in the future, how I was going to get where I want to be. But now, the past is a ghost because you think about it too much and you start wondering, should I have done this differently? Should I have done that? And the future is completely unknown when you've got stage 4. So you have to just stay where you are. Even if it's an uncomfortable place to stay. It's not always the best place to be. You can feel really poorly, but you just have to take each day as it comes. You'll get overwhelmed if not. I would anyway. I'd get very overwhelmed if not. So that's that for me, is a constant reminder to myself that just look at where you are now and just focus on that. Everything else will come.
Well, I love that, Megan, and I so appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to share these little insights with us and to share with the rest of the community just some of the ups, the downs, the real and the raw. I really feel like you've done an excellent job of conveying and communicating what was on your heart and what is most meaningful to you. And I hope that those listening can take something away from this episode and share it with a friend.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up as you guys are listening. If you want to listen to this recording, you can find it here on the Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel, and it'll be up on the I Believe podcast in the next couple of weeks, which you can find on most listening channels: Apple, Google, Spotify, Podbean. There's like a host of, I'm sure, more podcast episode areas that you can listen. And the final note that I would say as we say goodbye would just be that if you're willing to donate or contribute to the podcast, please head to acureinsight.org/donate. And we would absolutely love and appreciate your continued support. And we're grateful again for our sponsorships that make this possible. So, Megan, is there anything else that you want to add to conclude?
No, just thank you so much for having me. It's been really good to talk to you. So I appreciate you giving me a voice today.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you've had such a powerful voice. So thank you for using your voice. We will see you guys next time.